I'm excited to hear today what public transit means to people in Cleveland, Ohio, in Greenville, South Carolina, and in Baltimore, Maryland. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. For that, I want to say a few words about the people in East Palestine, Ohio, in the aftermath of the Silicon Valley bank collapse. They both have one thing in common. Companies followed the Wall Street business model, obsessed with short-term profits at the expense of everything and everyone else. They were aided and abetted by corporate lobbyists and the politicians here who do their bidding, weakening rules meant to protect the people whom we serve. And now working people in Ohio and around the country pay the price. As the nation knows, East Palestine is a tight-knit town in Columbiana County near the Ohio River, near the Pennsylvania border, which once made 80% of all the ceramics in this country. Before those jobs, like so many in my hometown of Mansfield and others, moved overseas because companies pay less overseas. This town, neighboring communities in Beaver County, Pennsylvania, Senator Fetterman, a member of this committee, the state he represents, are the kinds of places too often forgotten or exploited by corporate America. Now these Ohioans are worried about whether their water is safe to drink, whether the air is safe to breathe, whether their beef cattle can now sell a side of beef, whether their kids will get sick, and of interest to this committee, what happens to the value of their homes. All because of a train derailment caused by a corporate culture of cutting corners and cutting safety rules. Norfolk Southern chose to invest much of its massive profits in making its executives and shareholders wealthier at the expense of Ohio communities along its rail tracks like East Palestine, Steubenville, where there was a derailment, Sandusky, where there's a derailment, Springfield, 200 cars derailed since East Palestine. The company followed the Wall Street business model, boost profits and its stock price by eliminating more than a third, 38% of its workers over 10 years, then spent $3.4 billion in stock buybacks, and we're going to do more when this accident happened, instead of investing in its workers and investing in safety. Senator Vance and I have come together to introduce our Railway Safety Act to make trains safer as they go through communities like East Palestine. We're working with the Commerce Committee to move that legislation forward quickly. For decades, the railroads have lobbied to undermine safety rules. They're fighting basic requirements like having two drivers, two engineers, two pilots, if you will, on these trains. 2.5-mile long trains, 200 cars. The railroads want only one human being on that train driving it. Think of that. The railroads think that a train more than 2 miles long needs only one crew member. We know what it's about. Cut costs to boost profits, something you can't do in your jobs. The communities along their routes be damned. It's the same story with Silicon Valley Bank, and we will have hearings about that soon. For as long as we've had big banks, they've had too much power in this town. Think of the two of the most powerful lobbyists in this town for 100 years, the banks and the railroads. It's how we got the financial crisis of '08 that wiped out workers' savings and permanently set back an entire generation of young Americans. Of course, Wall Street didn't change its ways. Wall Street banks spent the ensuing years lobbying to roll back safeguards we passed in the wake of that crisis. Now, the now defunct Silicon Valley Bank spends hundreds of thousands of dollars pushing for exemptions for banks like this. Their CEO, who came to testify, who now is, I guess, unemployed, sort of, said they shouldn't be subject to strong guardrails because of, quote, the low-risk profile of our activities and business model. Low-risk profile, his words. We know what that really wanted to do, maximize profits, risk be damned. Now look what's happened. The paychecks of thousands of Ohioans, I talked to the leaders of these companies, were at stake last weekend because of these Silicon Valley's executives' arrogance and incompetence. When we let corporations run the economy, workers and their families always pay, whether they're in Cleveland, whether they're in Maryland, whether they're in South Carolina. They always pay, whether it's for the greed of Norfolk Southern or Silicon Valley Bank or Big Pharma or Big Oil. Pretty simple question at stake in everything we do in these jobs. Whose side are you on? Do you stand with corporate lobbyists or do you stand with communities like East Palestine? Do you stand with Silicon Valley executives and venture capitalists or do you stand with small business? Do you stand with Wall Street or do you stand with workers? Same fight over and over and over again. As this committee looks at how to respond to this latest in the long line of financial industry incompetence and greed, I hope my colleagues will put partisanship aside, as Senator Vance and I are doing on rail safety, to stand with the people we serve. Turning to transit, our committee worked on a bipartisan basis to include, as the three of you know, the biggest investment in transit ever in the bipartisan infrastructure law. Better transit means new zero emissions and low emission buses. I've talked to the CEO of the Cleveland, the RTA in Cleveland, and she is so on top of that, and it really matters. It means faster, safer service. More people can get to the doctor, to the grocery store, to work, to church. It means more opportunity for all the communities that have been ignored and exploited for too long, whether it's a black community or a brown community, whether it's small towns or rural areas, all the above. I've worked with Senator Rounds a lot. He understands rural transit, perhaps anybody better than anybody on the committee with the work he does with Senator Smith both have major rural areas in their upper Midwest states. I'm looking forward to working with Ranking Member Scott on transit issues. Today we have witnesses today from both of our home states. We'll hear how the Cleveland RTA is improving their bus and rail service for riders and in replacing decades-old rail cars. The RTA has been planning their investments in new rail cars for years. Because of work we did on the infrastructure law, they're finally going to be able to get better cars and newer, cleaner buses. And Ms. Minor, thank you for nodding as I'm saying that. So Cleveland's also home to the Health Line on Euclid Avenue, one of the best bus rapid transit corridors in the country, and they're joining other transit agencies in Ohio to expand their faster service. I live in the city of Cleveland. I see the kind of service they're giving. Ms. Burnsong Terry is deeply committed to attracting new workers to the transit industry. 2,000 employees she has, so that's a club estimate number, to ensuring these workers have the training they need. I'm also interested to hear how GreenLink will grow in the years ahead to meet the mobility needs of Greenville, South Carolina. Thank you for being here. And we're lucky to have the president of the Amalgamated Transit Unions Baltimore Local, Mr. McMillan, has been an important partner to the committee in making transit safer for riders and workers. Mr. McMillan, thank you for how you honor the dignity of work and fight for your workers. We have an opportunity this Congress to listen to local voices. Senator Scott and I like to do that to learn how to help more Americans enjoy high-quality transit service. We begin that work today. Senator Scott.